Brian Jones, you've just hosted the most successful podcast in all of America. What are you going to do now?
I'm going to Disney World.
Hey everyone, welcome to TV Guys, the last piece of media that is not yet owned by the Disney company. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and make us an offer.
Exactly. Oh, I spoke too soon. We are now owned by Disney. It's great. That's it. That's all of it. We did it. So we are talking about Disney World, not just Disney World, but it seemed like if you were a kid of, if you watch the Super Bowl halftime show, this is the show for you because you grew up in the time that, and you were a fan of it. You grew up in the time where it's like every single sitcom was like, I think we need to have a Disney World episode. And you had like all these sitcoms going to Disney World. They still kind of do that today, but it was really in its heyday in the early 90s to mid 90s.
Yep. I brought this idea to Matt because, see if I get the list right, Full House, Family Matters, Step by Step, Boy Meets World, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Roseanne, and even the Muppets did a special in Walt Disney World. And this was all within the 90s.
Yeah. And I think late 90s, I threw this to Brian. I think Simpsons did a Disney episode too.
Oh, you gave me this episode to watch, and I didn't. But I haven't had any time.
Way to go. Look at me. I've got a life. I can't watch things.
I watched a couple of the ones that I had picked out, but I forgot to watch the ones for you.
I watched all the ones you picked out. So this week, I watched my first full episode ever of Step by Step, of Family Matters, and of Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Huh.
3 new shows never watched before. And I didn't watch a whole lot of Roseanne, but I think I've seen 1 or 2 other episodes. So okay. I can't say it's my first.
So so I haven't watched all of those. You think you're probably more up to date, but I've seen all of them before.
So let's look at one of the, I mean, when we talk about Disney World episodes, like I brought up to Angie that we were doing a Disney World episode, and like, I was like, well, you know, all these shows go to Disney World. She's like, oh, like Full House. I feel like when people think of Disney World episodes, that usually is the one that comes to mind. And so I don't know. For me, it feels like it's a pinnacle one. I think even like on lists where like they're ranking them, that's like a number 1. I didn't like it so much, but I mean, it has some very set specific stuff.
Well, all of these shows, a lot of them, they have to have, it's like a formula. First of all, you have to have some big event that allows everyone to go to Disney World, which for Full House was different because they're all in the same house, but they're different families. So it's like it first starts with Jesse's taking Becky to Disney World because his band is playing there. And then all of a sudden Danny's like, hey, I'm going to take the family to Disney World because it just happens to be that my show is on reruns and all the kids are off school. And then Joey's like, hey, look, I'm going to do our radio show from Disney World too. And then even Kimmy Gibbler was like, yeah, my parents will pay for any vacation I take as long as I take it without them. And it's just like all that happens within 5 minutes. It's like really convenient that everybody happens to get to go to Disney World at the same time.
Yeah. And then Steve doesn't get to go, but he still surprises DJ later in the episode.
Should we get into my Steve rant now?
Let's just get it out of the way. You've got your Steve rant. I'm ready for it.
Okay, first of all, you know that, and our listeners might know, that Steve, the actor Scott Weinger, was the voice of Aladdin in the 1992 Aladdin.
That's right. Yep.
So the storyline is that DJ is so sad. She misses her boyfriend so much. And they're at this Aladdin exhibit. And they have all the characters, and she looks up, and then she sees Steve as Aladdin. And at first, like, hey, cool, that's a little like inside joke because they actually have the actor dressed up as his character. But then they ruined it by later on. She keeps seeing him, like she sees him as both Prince Charming and as Indiana Jones. But it's like, well, then you ruined it because it makes the Aladdin thing less special because he was not Prince Charming and he was not Indiana Jones. So, like, I don't know, it's just cool. Like they start out with something interesting and then they ruined it.
I imagine that it was one of those like, oh, that's the inspiration for it. Like, of course, he played Aladdin. How can we do something to put him in Aladdin garb?
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, we need to stretch this arc out for 2 episodes because this is most of these Disney episodes, there's like 3 or 4 of them that are actually two-parters.
Yeah.
Like the Roseanne one, they don't even get to Disney World in the first one when they announce they're going to Disney World. It's like a lot of stuff happens on the plane, and then the plane lands, and that's the end of the first episode. And then the second one, they're actually at Disney World.
Yeah.
But so for this one, having to stretch out over 2 episodes, they are like, well, what can we do with these characters? Because what I will give Full House credit for is that they gave every single character in it something to do, where it's like some of these other ones that we watched, I was like, oh, they're not really there. Like the Boy Meets World episode, it was all about Corey and Topanga, and Sean was there. Nothing, the parents weren't even in it until the final like minute of the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, and they didn't. With the other shows, everyone got to go to Disney World. I was looking at like one of these Comic-Con panels from Boy Meets World, and Will Friedle, who played Eric, was like, "Yeah, I remember." They were like, "Hey, we're doing a Disney World episode, but only for you 3."
Everyone else, you're fine. Whatever. But it's really funny. So we jump back in to talk about formula, and it is really funny to see the formula of all of these Disney episodes, because it's like we have to show. I mean, that's what people want to see when these characters go to Disney World. You want to see them on the rides. You want to see them as a part of the Disney World economy, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so you see Danny and Vicky there in around the world in Epcot because he's trying to propose. Yeah. Then you see them all in the parade later. You see them riding rides and getting that piece of it. And so it is really cool to see all of that stuff. But I mean, let's be honest. It is a Disney World commercial, and that's kind of the whole point of all of it. And so,
yeah, and they always stay at like the really nice hotels.
Yeah.
Which, okay, again, going back to my Steve rant a little bit. Steve, a high school student, was able to fly to Florida and book a room at the Grand Floridian Hotel.
I didn't realize he got the ticket or the hotel stay there, but I mean, like when I was looking at it too, we just went to Disney World last year, and like I pay attention to pricing, and I see how like the inflation of Disney has just gotten insane. It's like it costs 2 to 3 times the amount to go to Disney World now than it did versus then. Sure, there's inflation in there, but there's also, it's like Disney inflation, quote unquote. It's like you're paying for so much. And so yeah, it was always expensive to go, but I mean, I think it's even more so nowadays.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think it's Full House. I think the biggest storyline besides Danny trying to propose to Vicky is, which again, another through line through this, there's more than one of these shows had a proposal at like the big bandstand. There was also the whole thing about Michelle becoming queen for the day, and then basically just bossing her sisters around and having a terrible time,
which was super annoying, super contrived of a storyline. I'm sorry if you're a Full House fan. I'll tell you what my favorite episode that I watched this week was when we get to it. But Full House is probably one of my least favorites, because it's just like I watched this show and I'm like, the dialogue is so forced. It's so unrealistic. And I get that for some, like that's a nice appeal of like the overtly saccharine, like, well, if I just have a conversation with you, you'll come to your senses and realize that this is how things should be. And it's like, that's not life. You don't wrap it up. I mean, I know there's a degree of that in all these shows, but Full House is the worst offender of it.
I have a little bit of nostalgia for Full House because when you're a kid, you don't recognize bad dialogue. Yeah. But looking back, I mean, you're right. It is not A quality writing.
No, not at all. It's just like
neither is Fuller House, by the way.
I bet. I believe that 100%.
All right, so I picked Full House to start with. Which one do you want to jump into next, Matt?
Oh, I think I cut you off in the middle of an idea because you're talking about like, multiple ones have proposal things. Multiple shows have a character as Indiana Jones.
Yep, I was going to bring that one.
Yep. Multiple ones have the storyline of, well, we're just trying to get alone time, and we can't get alone time because of all the other characters. Yep. So actually, let's just jump into another show that did both of those. Let's hit Step by Step, because they did that storyline. They did Flash as Indiana Jones, which I liked that. So I'll jump in. This had 2 storylines I'm in for. I actually liked a lot of what I saw from Step by Step. My first time watching the show, not knowing these characters, I was already drawn a little bit to, I don't remember what his character's name is, but he was the one who voices Max from Goof Troop and Goofy Movie.
Oh, Rich, yeah.
who was also in Boy Meets World.
Yeah,
He was in that for what?
and he was in
seasons?
Full House too.
Of course he is. He is a '90s TV actor. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. He is the face of ABC '90s to me.
So there's two storylines I'm going to hit on here, and then you can talk about other.
I bet I know which one of yours is. One of yours the Flash one.
I do like the Flash.
I knew you would,
because again, that is sure it's advertising Disney. I mean, that's just part of it. But Flash's storyline is he finds out in this book they're reading about Disney World that the record for the most rides rode in 4 days time goes to this Russian guy, and he's like, well, let's get this back on American soil. I can beat that record. And so then he starts in on it and then finds out it's not just the rides, but it's also concession stands and souvenir shops. And he rode all the rides. He stopped at every souvenir shop. He stopped at every concession stand or hot dog stand or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so Flash has got his work cut out for him. And I really enjoyed just him running around. I don't know much about his character, but I was watching him and I get this like Diet Marty McFly vibe from him. Mm-hmm. He just kind of feels like he's copied his mannerisms
and his voice pattern too. You mentioned it, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and if Flash was brought in, because remember when we talked about the characters who could lift Mjolnir, I mentioned Cody, who wasn't in this episode. Ironically, because I said he was worthy to lift Mjolnir, the actor who played Cody was fired because of some domestic abuse issues. So the character is worthy, the actor is not. And to kind of fill that like happy-go-lucky character, they brought in Flash for the rest of that season.
You know, speaking of which, I know that this isn't the Mjolnir episode anymore, and it's funny that you say that because it's like, if I think back on it, I could see the dad from Cosby's Show being worthy to lift Mjolnir. Another one that in real life, absolutely not. But I think he has a good character. All right. Let's get back to step by step.
Yeah. That was I think those are the best ones. And also Rich has this, he's thinking about Rich and JT storyline has this mannerism and his comedic timing I think is really good. Otherwise, without Rich, I think that storyline would have been kind of boring.
Yeah, Rich's actor did a really good job. I enjoyed his comedy. I think you're right. That's a really good assessment. JT was a little stale, but Rich gave it livelihood. And then the conflict didn't feel forced because you can absolutely see some teenage guys trying to impress girls and not knowing very good financial stability at the time and just running out. I think that there's a lot of common stories of people in their early 20s or late teens where they maybe have some money saved up, or like they get a paycheck and they go through it a lot quicker than they realize they should have. So
it's easy to do as adults too.
Yeah, that's true. There's 40 or 50-year-olds who still do that. I enjoyed both of those.
Did you recognize one of the girls they were trying to impress?
I thought I did. I can't remember now anymore. Who was it?
How about why don't we save that for trivia?
Oh, okay. I think I know who it is, if I'm remembering right. So, okay. And then there's two other storylines that the girls. This was a crappy one. Is the girls were singing?
Yeah. That was basically just like we have nothing to do for the girls. They're gonna sing.
Yeah, and it's like that was like brought up once in the first episode because this is another two-parter. It's like they brought up that thing once in the first episode, so they only had like one scene for the girls in the first episode, and then the second episode they had them do that. And then there was the parents that they had we want to spend time together and we can't get alone time. Yeah. That one, which was. That's fine. Whatever.
Also, now that you've seen the Step by Step, did you notice that Dana from Step by Step popped up in the Boy Meets World episode too?
Who's Dana?
Dana's the older girl who was with like the really white blonde hair, and because that aired the same night as the Boy Meets World Disney World episode. So when Corey was in like the dolphin area, he talks to that girl he talks to. That's Dana from Step by Step.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I see that. That was the same night.
Yeah, so that it was just kind of like it didn't have anything to do with each other, but it's kind of a cool little cross promotion because people would have just saw. I think Step by Step aired first, and they would have just seen her and like, hey, look, she's on this show too.
Sure. I was going to save this for the end, but I'll talk about this and then I'll save something else for the end. This episode too, like there was when we're talking about advertising for Disney, at the time, the newest park it was called Disney MGM Studios back then. Now it's Hollywood Studios. And so like you saw a lot of like that's why in both these two episodes we've talked so far, there was the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular, because that is a huge show. That is one of the big draws that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And so they really wanted to highlight that, because I don't feel like it would have worked well and naturally to highlight maybe the Great Movie Ride, which was another one of their big rides at the time. And they didn't get Twilight Zone until maybe after these two episodes aired, because we saw it in Family Matters. They did have Twilight Zone in this one.
The Tower
so they
of Terror?
showed you that one, the Tower of Terror one. Yeah,
Yep.
They did have that. Yep, it was already up.
And if you look closely, the actor who played like the bellhop, like the creepy guy welcoming
Mhm.
in, was the same exact one who was in Family Matters and Step by Step. It was the same guy.
Nice. I remember seeing him from promotional materials for that too, because they absolutely did use promotional materials. I remember when they had the commercials for Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, and I remember some of the exact shots they used. They used those shots in these episodes as B-roll footage.
Yeah.
For that stuff. So it's definitely, you see that Hollywood Studios influence, and then you also see a little bit more of Epcot too. We'll get to Boy Meets World in a second. Boy Meets World definitely was like heavy Epcot. Very little Magic Kingdom, but a lot of Epcot.
Yeah.
And so you would see with these episodes, there's a lot more Epcot than there is Magic Kingdom to kind of still push that. Because that wasn't as popular of a park as Magic Kingdom was still at that time.
Did you want to jump into Boy Meets World then? So we've both talked about it.
Sure. And I would have saved it for last, because this is actually the one that's my favorite.
Really?
And it's not just because I loved Boy Meets World and watched it as a kid, but as I watched it, some of these jokes really landed with me, where I'm like, this is why I like Boy Meets World, is because it actually has clever humor. There's a scene when Corey can't sleep at night, when they're still back in his hometown, in his house, and his brother's like, "Or you're just busy thinking about Topanga." He's like, "How did you know?" And he turns on a light, and it shines this huge like beacon on almost like this Topanga altar of like this poster he has, that like the lights are shining right on this poster of Topanga, and it's like so clearly obvious. It was just such a funny joke to me.
Yeah.
Or another one at the beginning of the episode where Corey is dating all these girls, and Sean's like, "Oh, you know what I do? Did you forget a name? Because like I just write down names on my hand, that way I can remember it better." And then he looks at his hand and says Corey.
Yeah. That was a good gag. The reason this is not my favorite in this category is because they went halfway. Like we said, like I want to see the whole Boy Meets World gang in Disney World. Wouldn't you love to see Eric Dragon Feeney around Disney World?
I would love to see that 100%.
It's like we said earlier, they only brought Corey and Sean and Topanga to Disney World, and there was a lot of great humor. And as a Boy Meets World episode, it's great. But like when I'm thinking of like a Disney World episode, I want them to go all in.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. I will say it has points in the Disney department, because it showed us the behind the scenes of the Living Seas, which was, this is one thing that was great about Epcot, is Epcot was like a very educational park. And so it was able to blend education and entertainment really well. So it was really cool to see that side of it. But I think you're absolutely right. This might have been one that, if they could have brought everyone together to Orlando, they would have done a two-parter, because I think that we could have gotten a good two-part episode out of this. But the emotional beat of it was really good. The Topanga and Corey thing. I don't remember why they broke up in the first place before this episode happened. They broke up so many different times throughout the course of the show. But this was one of their let's get back together, and it was a very satisfying conclusion of that.
Yeah, it was. Also, this episode, so Corey is worried about Topanga with this guy they call Hot Lips. And I forget the actor's name, but this is another 90s actor. He played a love interest on Boy Meets World. He was a love interest on Seventh Heaven, and he was a love interest on Step by Step as well.
He was in movies too, I'm sure. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but he's one of those actors. Like, you've got those actors now that you see and you're like, oh, I've seen them in like 5 other shows. He's one of those guys. You saw him like everywhere.
I call him for the 90s. I call him like the backup Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Yeah, he's a model first. They're like, oh, this is the model we're gonna get. When we need generic hot guy for a teenager, we're just gonna throw him in.
Yeah, pretty much. All I really have about Boy Meets World. Which one do you want to jump into next?
Well, let's talk about a show that I had never watched, and the only show that was late enough to be able to have the park Animal Kingdom in it, and that was Sabrina the Teenage
Yeah.
Witch.
So I didn't watch this one this week, but I have seen that episode. One thing is like again, like they're at Disney World, but a lot of the episode take place in the hotel room with her trying to figure out her family secret.
There's a good amount in there, and then there's a good amount at the actual Animal Kingdom park. And this was another one that maybe you're going to have the same complaint, is that sure, it was great to see this new park that I'm sure it was new at the time. I don't remember exactly what year this was and when that the Animal Kingdom opened.
Yeah.
But they did not hit any other park. In fact, even the hotel that they stayed at is the Animal Kingdom hotel that's so close to that park. And so they're really pushing this new hotel, this new park that they have, and it's again so clearly advertising.
Yeah, it was also probably convenient for filming because they probably didn't even need to bring like the crew to the other parks then.
Yeah, I'm sure. Good point.
Yeah, and wasn't the storyline that she turns Libby, like the mean girl, into, was it a giraffe or a zebra?
Zebra, yeah.
He turns her into zebra.
And then her best friend, they were both zebras.
Yeah.
And that was that was an accident. Her best friend took the drink that she had made to begin with and thought it was like tea, and then spilled it on both of them, and they both turned into zebras.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this show had Martin Mull in it. I love Martin Mull.
Yeah.
He is a great actor.
He was on there for a good chunk of it. He's like the principal, and then he becomes a love interest to one of her aunts. This was my exposure to Martin Mull.
Mine was Clue, and that is a great exposure to Martin Mull.
Yeah, I think Clue came shortly after this.
Really? I thought it was like 84, 85.
No, I mean, like, as far as like I saw Clue
after you.
I saw it. Yes, for me.
It's like,
yeah,
no, I think your timelines are off.
Yeah. And then Martin Mull was recently on a show called The Cool Kids, which only lasted one season, which I really liked. It's about like older people, this group of old friends in a retirement home. It was him, okay. David Alan Grier, Leslie Jones, and Vicki Lawrence.
Nice. I like him and David Alan Grier.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. The Sabrina didn't really have many of the tropes we're talking about. There was no proposal. There's no Indiana Jones. There's nothing like that. True. But it was. I think it was still a pretty good one. I still appreciated the Animal Kingdom because we don't get to see Animal Kingdom that much.
Yeah, I think another complaint of this though is that Animal Kingdom at the time it was built, it was a very heavy show park. It wasn't so heavy on rides, and the only ride, I mean, I can't say the only ride, but like they had Kilimanjaro Safaris, which we did see a good amount of that because the love interest boy gets teleported over onto that ride, and he acts as the tour guide the entire time. Oh, that's right.
Ride. Yeah, Harvey, right? Yeah,
Harvey. Yeah, there you go. And that was funny, but that was the only like ride we got to see. So we saw like the Tree of Life, but there's a show underneath it, like the Tough to Be a Bug show, and they're not going to show that. I get it. Yeah. And then they had the dinosaur ride, but the dinosaur ride is inside in a very dark, like the whole idea of it is it's super dark. And so you're not going to see in there either. I get it. And so they didn't have a whole lot they could do ride-wise. So this, to me, did feel more strictly Sabrina episode, even though I've never seen the show. But it felt more like it's its own thing because it's not having to accommodate as much change as others do.
And this is a very much a trope they do with Harvey. So many episodes have Harvey getting like magically involved in something, and at the end they always have to like wipe his memory so he doesn't remember it. And it gets to the point where when they get to the college years, they say like he's had so many spells on him that he's worn, like the memory thing is worn off. So that the last couple seasons, he's just like knows Sabrina's a witch, and they're like we'll hang out and talk with Salem and stuff, which is cool.
Okay.
I think they were just like, you know what, this guy's been on the show for a long time, let's just let him know at this point.
Yeah, it's like with shows when you see it in the first season, you're like, how is this not gonna get stale? And then they do, like when they came out with Gotham and they're like, this is pre-villains and pre-Batman, and like, how long are you really going to be able to hold yourself off from actually letting these villains become the villains? How long are you going to hold yourself off before we see a Joker? And it's just like within a couple seasons they had a Joker already.
Isn't that the Smallville problem?
Smallville was a similar problem too. Yeah, at a certain point he grows up, he's in the city. Like the first 5 seasons could be called Smallville, but the last 5 seasons should have been called Metropolis. It really turned into a spin-off show more.
Yeah.
But
All right, so we have two more left. We have Family Matters and
Roseanne. And Simpsons, I can talk just a little bit about it.
And then I can talk briefly about the Muppet one too.
There you go.
Let's go into Family Matters because full disclosure, I've never actually seen the Roseanne one.
Really?
Yeah, I meant to watch it this week.
Bogus. All right, well then fine. Family Matters, by the way, sucks. I'm sorry if you're a Family Matters fan.
This episode sucks. Yeah, there are better episodes.
Also, a little Urkel goes a long way, and a little Stefan goes an even longer way. I'm not a Jaleel White guy for either of those things that he does in this show. But this episode, it was another 2-parter where Urkel gets entered into this contest where this was at the time where he was. What the heck happened with Family Matters? How in the world did it jump like 9 sharks to get where it ends? Where it's like, oh, this is a show about just a normal black family. Oh, by the way, here's this neighbor. Oh, by the way, this neighbor is going to start taking over more and more of this show. It's like Urkel slowly becomes this Urkel vacuum that absorbs like everything creative or everything good and sucks it in, and like everyone else is left with table scraps.
Okay, also, did you notice the giant contradiction they had in back-to-back sentences in the very first scene? Okay, Urkel walks in with his girlfriend Myra, right? And he's talking about, I get to go to Disney World for this contest. And he's saying to her, she's saying, I wish I could go with you. He's like, yes, I wish you could come with me too. Very next thing he says is, I get to bring anybody I want, so I'm going to bring the entire Winslow family. So you could have brought your girlfriend, but you chose not to. And you're announcing that in front of her, and nobody mentions that.
That's why I was confused too. Because also I was only like partly paying attention to, but like there's plenty of characters, and a lot of them just kind of blend together. And so the girl that was his girlfriend, and then the girl that he proposed to, that's actually one of the Winslows, for a little bit, I'm like, wait, are these the same person? These can't be the same person. They're not the same person, are they? I was confused for a little bit in this episode.
No. Also, the girl who played his girlfriend Myra, she actually died in the late '90s from cancer at her early age, and then she was also a recurring character on the Cosby Show as Theo's girlfriend too.
Gotcha. Yeah, from the second when he. Like his physical humor, I'm like, oh, this is one of those type of shows. That's why people like Urkel, is because they like his physical humor. Physical humor is good. I'm not.
But it's like clumsily written. It's like, oh, he's a nerd, so every time he's got to bump into someone, they have to throw all their papers around. Oh my gosh, did I do that? Like,
yeah.
And they really got this whole gimmick out of him having this transformation chamber to turn into Stefan, which is basically just giving Jaleel White a chance to be himself.
Yeah.
And that gag went on for seasons and seasons. And I think in the end, I'm trying to remember, I think they eventually he got himself cloned so he could like permanently have one of each all the time. But it's a really, I don't know, that is when it really started to jump the shark, when it came all about Urkel and all about his stuff.
Yeah. Although Angie, when I was saying this stuff and talking about it, she's like, well, with Stefan, at least it was able to get it so that what's her name? The Winslow daughter,
Laura, yeah.
Laura, that she chose Urkel instead of choosing like Stefan, that she chose to love him for him instead of loving him for this side of him.
That is
I'm
true.
like, all right, whatever. I don't know. I got no horse in this race. Never watched the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All I know is Reginald VelJohnson deserves better than what I can already tell that he was relegated to. He is a great actor. I love his demeanor. I love what he brings to roles. And even with the little bit they gave him in this one, I'm like, I want to see more Carl. I want to see what's going on with his life.
I like Carl. Carl's whole storyline is, I'm going to have fun at Disney World. That's it.
That's it. Yep. And then it's like the quote unquote magic of Disney World, like gives him amnesia or something where he doesn't remember any. It's like so against what they established as his character at the beginning of the show and what I'm sure his character is throughout the show. It's so against type of what they established, where it's like, I am going to have so much fun that I never want to have responsibility again. Like, what the heck is wrong with you? You can't move your whole family down to Disney World so you can be at Disney World every single day. That's not how that works.
No, and that would get old pretty quickly.
I mean, I'd love it. Which, by the way, is really fitting that we're talking about this today, even though you guys are going to be reading or listening to this at the end of February. Because speaking of Disney, they just announced today or yesterday, they announced that they are doing Disney communities, where it's Disney cities. Like I know that was the original idea with like Epcot, is that it was supposed to be this experimental prototype city of tomorrow, and it turned into an amusement park instead once Walt died, because that's just where they gravitated to. But now they're actually like trying to do that and create these communities. And I mean, like, anyone that's worried about Disney overreach, like, yeah, them owning a whole city, I know they kind of already do, because there are some small cities like communities around Disney World that they own there. So they kind of already have done a little bit of this, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like this is going to end well, even if it'll be a little more magical to live in a Disney city. But I think some of the behind the scenes is going to be like, all of my taxes, they all go to the mouse.
Yep, they sure do. Oh, and then Family Matters version of the JT and Rich storyline from Step by Step was that for some reason they never say why Eddie and Waldo, which by the way, Steve could bring Waldo. Steve can bring not only the Winslow family, including the grandma and the aunt and the cousin and Waldo, but he can't bring his girlfriend. Anyway, that Eddie and Waldo are driving across the country, and they take so long, and Waldo's taking them in wrong directions. So by the time I get there at the end of the episode, everyone's leaving.
So stupid. It's so stupid.
Which, like, does that mean, were those actors ever actually in Disney World?
I don't believe so then.
No,
no, they would be technically, because they show up at the hotel. The hotel's on Disney property. So
Okay.
technically, yes, they are at Disney World, just not in a Disney park.
So they got to go, but they didn't get to have any scenes in the park. And I mean, that just has to be one of the laziest. Like, what do we do with these guys? They're driving. What else? No, that's it.
So, it's so bad. This is Family Matters. So if we're ranking these shows, the worst is Full House. Although maybe this should be worst. Like, at least Full House, you got like a lot of good footage of Disney World. There was that good side of it, but everything about these storylines annoyed me. Whereas Full House, I was just bored. I wasn't actively annoyed. So maybe I will put Family Matters as my least of all of these, and Full House is right above it.
I also think all of these shows give you a false sense of how much access you get to animated walk-around characters.
That too, 100%. Or even just how, like, I know it was different back then. There wasn't the same level of crowd, but like, they all act like you're able to just get on all these rides. There was one scene from the Roseanne one. So let's just pivot into that. Okay. So Roseanne, when they get there, the second episode, because it's a two-parter, but the second one actually takes place at Disney World. And one little caveat is I had no idea that there was 3 characters from Big Bang Theory that were pulled off of Roseanne. I think I've heard that before, but to actually see them all on screen, and like, oh, hey, there's Leonard and the one scientist girl and Sheldon's mom.
Yep.
And so there was I'm gonna say the characters from Big Bang, because I don't remember their characters from Roseanne. So the scientist girl and Leonard, are dating in this.
Yeah, Darlene and David.
Darlene and David, and Darlene's brother are all kind of lumped together for their story when they're in the parks. And Darlene is just kind of like, I'm too cool for this. I don't want to have any fun. She just like sits on a bench, and so David and the brother DJ. And DJ, all the D's, they just all stood on a bench together, and DJ's like, I just want to go I want to go on the Astro Orbiter, I want to go on the rockets just like once. And so David's like, well, I can go take him, we'll be back in like 10 minutes. So they go on Astro Orbiter, and then it's like, where have you been? It's been an hour. He's like, oh, well, we went on that, and then we stopped at the Hall of Presidents, and then we went on Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and then look, we got these souvenirs from it. And it's like, no, even in the 90s, you couldn't do all 3 of those within an hour. Even if they were a walk-on, you could barely get onto those rides in that amount of time and then make it back to that bench where that's at. Like Adventureland and Tomorrowland, they're on the complete opposite sides of the park, and you're clearly walking all around the edge of the spoke because you have to go through the Liberty Square to get to the Hall of Presidents. And the Hall of Presidents show is like 15 minutes long, 20 minutes long. And so it's like, even if you walked on there, you'd be very hard pressed to get back within an hour. And I'm sure that they had to wait for even a little bit because those are popular attractions.
This is I'm not saying a problem. I think you see in a lot of shows where there could be something very unrealistic, but you have to ask yourself, how much of our audience is actually going to know enough about this subject to know how unrealistic it is? How much of the general public is that familiar with Disney World like you are to know the geography and where everything goes? Tell me not a ton, because I that's probably just a gamble that they made.
Yes. And I'd like, this isn't even going to mention all of the times in all of these episodes, except for maybe Sabrina. They didn't do any park hopping in that. When they're like in Magic Kingdom for this episode and they're just like, oh, well, I want to do lunch here. And the next scene, they're in Epcot. It's like, yes, I know that there's park hopping and you can take the monorail to get there and all that sort of stuff. But do you realize how much time that actually eats up to transport from one park to another, and then also like transport back, all the stuff that they shove into these days, and then like they're actually at multiple parks when they're in these days? I'm like, no, you wouldn't be able to do that. There's no way. Don't act like, oh, well, I'm just going to wander off on my own for a little bit. By the way, I'm going to be at the park across the way in Disney World.
Which is one thing they did in Step by Step when they had Mark was like in Disney headquarters giving Flash directions. He was giving them to like, hey, do this, then hop on the monorail to this park. Like they actually mentioned that in that episode. Yes. It was kind of cool.
That was another thing that I appreciated about it.
Except even I know they were not going to let some junior high kid take over the Disney security systems.
Yeah. My biggest eye roll is like, Flash is like, oh, let's talk in the office because the Indiana Jones got canceled for this one time slot. So the next time slot would be at 2, and this one kid really wanted to see it, and he's going to be let down. Well, Flash is like, I can do it. And it's like, no, the training that you would need to be in this stunt show, don't give me that. That is a liability nightmare. No one in their right mind would be like, okay, I'll let this guy that I don't really know be the lead for this Indiana Jones stunt show. Nuh-uh.
No,
at least leap in logic.
At least when Full House did it with Steve, it was an imagination. Steve wasn't actually there.
Exactly. Yep.
Not that he was Indiana Jones to begin with.
Look at this anger that's coming out. Yeah. So that was their story, and then Darlene comes around at the end because she is standing next to Winnie the Pooh and is like, "Oh wait, I loved you as a kid. Maybe I'll actually have fun." Blah, blah, blah. And what else? Oh,
Darlene's whole character of being a sarcastic downer is just her whole personality throughout all of Roseanne and in the Connor. She's like my least favorite character.
I mean, I get it though. Like she does it well. Just her demeanor. I'm like, yeah, I totally buy it.
That's her wheelhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember much of the apart from Dan. When they get to the Magic Kingdom, like they do rope drop, and so they're all like running to get to all these rides and everything. And then Dan's like, I'm excited to get a beer. And then Laurie Metcalf is just like, oh, they don't serve beer in the Magic Kingdom. You have to go to Epcot, which again, great. That is 100% a tidbit that is true. And I appreciate that they acknowledge that idea. Mm-hmm. And so he does go there. And then he does what is one of the most popular things in Epcot is the drinking around the world. So he goes to the German tavern, he goes to UK and trying to get beers at all these places. And then Roseanne joins him. I don't remember what Laurie Metcalf does in it. I don't remember. I just watched it today. It's apparently not that memorable.
It was Becky, the blonde daughter. Was she in that episode?
She was. Oh, okay. So you would appreciate this because it was a very meta moment at the beginning of the first episode before they ever get there, is that she enters and like, oh, we're all going to Disney World. It's like, aren't you glad you're here this week? And then like everyone's laughing and they have like that look in their face of like, oh, they did at the beginning of the episode too, to let you know like what was going on with it. It like does this freeze frame and the narrator's like, the part of what was her name? Sarah
Becky.
Chalk's Becky. The part of Becky has been played by so and so, and then played by Sarah Chalk, and then back to so and so, and today is being played by Sarah Chalk, and then she delivers that line.
Yeah, because the original actress was on for a while, then she left for college, and those two kind of ping pong back and forth doing the roles.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, you lucked out. You got to be the actor here this week.
Yeah,
that was a good meta gag.
That was cool. I was wondering. I was going to ask you if it was Sarah Chalk, if you recognized her.
Yes. Oh, of course. Oh, I know Sarah Chalk.
Yeah, but if it was Lacey Goranson, you might not have known her.
Yeah, I don't even know the name. Lacey Boring Stone. More like it.
Did we miss? Did we go through all of them besides the Simpsons?
Simpsons and Muppets.
Yep. So
go ahead. I talked more about Roseanne. So go ahead and hit Muppets and all.
Okay, so the Muppets, it's a TV special, which you could find on YouTube, I think, still. So this is right in the early 90s when Jim Henson was in the talks of selling the Muppets to Disney. And so it also went along with building the Muppet Vision 3D ride, which is still at Disney World now. And it's this big TV special where Kermit takes all the Muppets to visit his the swamp with all the swamp with all his frog family. And then the frogs mention, yeah, we can see the fireworks from Walt Disney World across the street. And the Muppets are all like, Disney World's across the street? And they all like leave Kermit and they go to Disney World. And so Kermit's all sad throughout the special because his friends don't want to hang out at the swamp. They want to be at Disney World instead. But then it's kind of cool. You get an odd pairing of like Beauregard and Miss Piggy, where Beauregard's like dragging Miss Piggy on all the rides and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the Electric Mayhem does like a world tour through like the Epcot cities. Like they do like their rock and roll world tour.
Oh, nice.
Fozzie Bear he just tries to tell jokes to all the animated characters, and it's a weird gag where like Winnie the Pooh and all the bear characters are like thinking he's the hilarious one because like, oh, he's funny to bears, that was dumb.
It may have been dumb in practice, but your pitch of it, I liked. I liked the concept of.
Yep. And talking about behind the scenes stuff we don't normally see. Gonzo and Camilla, the chicken, go behind the scenes and hang out with the laundry service of Disney World and sing a whole musical number about love in a laundry.
Like Dr. Horrible sing-along vlog.
And see, Rolf the dog, he shows you like the pet care center and sings a song with all the dogs because he gets caught by the dog catcher. And it's kind of, this is like showing you all about Disney World, even the laundry, I suppose. And it ends with, I don't think it was the Indiana Jones show, but it was one of those act out shows where Kermit and Piggy get to be part of like the stage show, which is kind of cool. And it's just kind of cool seeing all the Muppets hang out at Disney World.
Yeah. And Muppets, I think we actually hit on this last week when we had Jeff on. I feel like I just talked about this in the podcast of the idea for there was more to do with Muppets in MGM Studios, but they just weren't able. There's a lot of like projects that I know about and I've read about that like, oh, we were going to do this, but we just didn't have the money. It's like if you've ever been to Universal Studios Islands of Adventure, there is this land there that is still barely intact, but it's been mostly taken over by Harry Potter stuff. But it was this land called the Forbidden Continent, and they had like stuff about dragons, like this dueling dragons roller coaster. And so they had all of this ideas, but those ideas came from the original Animal Kingdom design. If you look at the Animal Kingdom logo, there's like 5 or 6 silhouettes of animals right above the Animal Kingdom words. And one of them is a dragon because they had intended that they were going to do like all this stuff about animals, real, extinct, and imaginary. And so they had some plans for dragon stuff, but they had to drop it last minute where it's like, we're running out of we're running out over budget. We have to either drop the dinosaurs or we have to drop the imaginary stuff. And they dropped the imaginary stuff with the like intention they were going to do more with it later. And they never did. And Universal poached all of these people who were working on that, who had these ideas that were really fleshed out. And then it was just like the plug was pulled at the last minute for them and they felt jilted. And Universal's like, we want to partner with you and help make that a reality over at Universal. And that's why we have that Forbidden Continent in Universal Islands of Adventure. And so, they had these plans for Muppets at MGM Studios. They also had plans for where the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is, that was supposed to, everything over there was supposed to be a Who Framed Roger Rabbit land. And they would have like the cable cars. You know how like it's kind of like a weird walk to that area. There's like a long street and there's really nothing on that street except for some shops. Is that was supposed to be like a cable car area where you could jump on it at one end and it would just take you all the way down. And where the Rock and Roller Coaster is now, they're going to have like a trolley type ride, like dark ride inside sort of thing. So they had these plans for Roger Rabbit that fell through. They had plans for Muppets that fell through. So there's lots of stuff that I would love to see if they would have done, but they didn't.
With unlimited time and money, I mean, a lot of stuff could happen.
Yeah. I mean, I was excited for this Mary Poppins ride that they announced like a couple years back that they were going to do in the UK in Epcot. And then pandemic happened and they're like, we're pulling back a lot. And so like some things just got froze. Like, did you know the Tron roller coaster that they were building in Magic Kingdom is entering year 4 of construction? 4 years for one coaster. Wow. And whereas Universal, they built this Velocicoaster that you might have seen advertisements for because they actually had a Super Bowl advertisement for it. They built this Velocicoaster in 1 year. They just like threw that thing up overnight, and it's a fantastic roller coaster. If you're ever in Islands Adventure, go on Velocicoaster. It's one of the best roller coasters I've ever been on. It's great.
I'll do that. Matt, have you ever heard of the Defunct Land YouTube series?
I have. I've watched some of Defunct Land. I watch more theme park history and there's one other one, Expedition.
It's really cool to see like behind the scenes of some of these rides and attractions that have come and gone.
Yeah, I love that. I love those video essays. And then there's one Disney World one there's like 3 that I subscribe to, and I watch some Defunct Land stuff. The narrator just wasn't like my type. I didn't get with a narrator.
I get
That's why I don't subscribe. So no offense if for some reason, Mr. Defunct Land, you stumbled into this. I apologize. I don't know what it is. It just didn't click.
But we'll still have you on as a guest if you want.
Yeah, and then you can yell at me. Feel free. Okay, so we just finished with Muppets. Anything else with that?
Nope. There's really nothing major. I mean, I basically said all the main beats of the storyline.
Nice. So here's one that doesn't quite fit the whole idea of all these other ones, because everything else is like advertising for Disney. And then Simpsons is like, no, we want to mock Disney. And I completely get that. So they had an episode. They actually go to Disneyland in an episode, but in the one that I'm talking about, it's an episode called Special Edna, where the teacher, Edna Krabappel, she gets this Teacher of the Year award. And so she goes down to Orlando to receive it, and it's at Epcot. And so, this is one of the things that's funny is that they're talking about like, oh, sweet, we're all going to go down to Disney World. It'll be great. And they get there and then they realize they're at Epcot Center and they're all disappointed. And like, they're acting like this isn't really Disney World. It's even though it is technically. And so they're all like, oh, Epcot, this sucks. And so then they're on like different rides. And so like they mock the whole idea because at the time, sponsorships were a huge thing. Like every single ride in Future World and Epcot was like sponsored by so-and-so. The World of Motion sponsored by GM. The Communication Sphere Spaceship Earth sponsored by AT&T. And the idea was like, we're showing this technology and what we can do with this technology and what would be great for it. And so it really made sense, the sponsorships that they had. So they're mocking it in one of these rides. So they go on like a ride like this and it's just like, our plan is world domination by 2026. And then they're like, but here's a nice song to keep you preoccupied. And so like they're going through this little tunnel and they see like everyone like being whipped by this corporation overlords, but it's like this happy-go-lucky song playing.
I think I've seen that.
Yep. So it was a funny idea, the whole idea, like just really mocking Epcot, taking shots at them. But it was still a very specifically a Simpsons episode. And so it was just worth bringing up because I enjoyed it, thought it was fun. And then Homer does slip into Magic Kingdom at the end of the episode, gets over the barbed wire fence. And then you hear him, "1 churro, please. I'll be $15. Ah! Yeah. There's Simpsons for you.
There you go. And the interesting thing with Simpsons, because with The Simpsons, you could really play with the timeline because I know you talk about how like you and Roseanne they were going from this ride to this ride.
Yep.
At Disney World, they don't even have to go. They can just animate everything, so they could literally really play with the timeline and realism of everything. But to do that and to still just keep it at Epcot for the story, I think is a really funny choice.
Yes. Yep, I agree. And speaking of playing with timelines, so last year on the show The Goldbergs, which if you don't know, The Goldbergs takes place in the 80s. That's the whole like crux of the show. It's just plays on that 80s nostalgia a whole lot and tells the story of Adam Goldberg and his family as he was growing up in the 1980s. Great elevator pitch for a TV show. But they go to Disney World in last year's episode. And when they get to Disney World, they go on things like Galaxy's Edge and the Rise of the Resistance. Those are new. They are released 2 years ago. These did not exist in 1986. I don't know what you guys. This is too far. I understand Disney, you own ABC and you want synergy between your brands. And so it's like this sort of idea, it gained this traction, this synergy between brands with Michael Eisner, because after Walt Disney died, Disney actually went through a tough time. There was a lot of like, oh, are we going to go bankrupt? There was a lot of, let's put out these movies that just are not commercial successes. Like if you look at the Disney catalog between 1959 and 1984, you're going to see a lack of Disney strength. There was Pinocchio was still before that. I think Dumbo might have been in there. Bambi was in there, I think. And so there's like, you had a couple of their classics, but the classics of Disney, they came either when Walt was head or after the addition of the CEO, Michael Eisner, in 1984. And Eisner gets a lot of crap because he did some choices at the end of his career that people didn't like, and he made some odd Disney choices. If you ever were at Magic Kingdom for the Alien Encounter ride, it's a unique ride, but it's very off-brand for Disney. So there's some things that he pushed that he went with, or like the direct-to-video sequels that were big at the end of his career, why we have a Little Mermaid 2 and
Lion King
2 and 1.5.
Yeah,
and they're all bad. That was Eisner, but Eisner also did a really good job of leading Disney into this Disney Renaissance. We wouldn't have gotten it was launched with these movies because he hit gold with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which, by the way, I just found out Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is coming back. There's a sequel with Josh Gad, and Rick Moranis is coming out of retirement to reprise his role. I know. I just saw that yesterday. Wayne Szalinski is coming back. It's not like the role I would pick for him. I would have had him come back as a Dark Helmet for Spaceballs 2. But still, I love Rick Moranis. I'm so excited to see him back. And Josh Gad is pretty good, so I'm sure the two of them will be great.
Yeah, I mean, there's Spaceballs, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Ghostbusters, the Flintstones. He did a lot of great stuff.
He did some great stuff. But it's like we look at the Disney Renaissance. I was actually thinking about this the other day. It's like, sometimes we think the Disney Renaissance got kicked off with maybe Beauty and the Beast or Little Mermaid, but it really was kicked off with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Like that movie made so much more than anyone was anticipating, and it rejuvenated Disney's movies. But Eisner was a huge part in like making sure that Disney Hollywood Studio or MGM Studios at the time got kicked off the ground, of making sure that there was quality stuff for teenagers and young adults, that it wasn't just this is for kids and old people. And so he did a lot of great things for Disney, but part of it was this brand synergy of getting ABC and then using ABC shows to start promoting the park and doing what Walt did, because Walt did this stuff on Sunday nights where he'd show people, in order almost to get funding and get excitement and draw up this good press, he'd have this show on Sunday nights where it was the magical world of Disney, and he'd talk about projects that are coming up. And so Michael Eisner took that and he marketed it, and he did a little different with these shows, but I think honestly it was successful. Disney had such a huge growth in Eisner's career, and then he followed up with Bob Iger and had huge growth in his, but it was under Eisner's helm that we saw all of these episodes. So it's like, yeah, he gets some crap because he was a numbers guy, but he also did some really good stuff creatively and really helped push for some good stuff to create Disney that we know today.
It's funny you talk about like the different like Disney eras, which you probably know way more about this than me, but I think like the 80s and 90s was a big resurgence with Disney classics like, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King. I kind of like the section that came next, which I would call like the late 90s, early 2000s, which was like Hercules, Tarzan, Emperor's New Groove, Lilo and Stitch, like that era. I think that is one of the most underrated Disney eras.
I'll give you that it's underrated. I don't think it holds a candle to like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Lion King. Those are like such almost perfect films, but Tarzan was okay. What was the other? Emperor's New Groove. That is 100% underrated. That is a fantastic Disney movie. The Goofy movie, another extremely underrated Disney movie. Absolutely fantastic.
And Hercules great soundtrack. Amazing soundtrack to the Goofy movie. A Goofy movie is what it's called, yeah.
All right, we got to end this episode with this idea. I saw there's been these rumors talking about the Rock and Roller Coaster that the Aerosmith contract is up this year, and like, are we going to renew the Aerosmith contract or are we going to retheme Rock and Roller Coaster? Two of the big ideas are one that I think you commented something about it, but Electric Mayhem from the Muppets doing like their version of the Rock and Roller Coaster.
Yeah, I'd be out for it. Yeah.
I know you. I would be all for it too because it's different. I think that's a great ride, but I am up for seeing something different. I'm really interested in that. But then the other one would be a Powerline theme.
From Goofy movie. Yes,
that would be so cool. Now it's a completely outdated. Like, okay, Rock and Roller Coaster came 2 years after Goofy movie, so I mean, it's like, oh, let's replace this old band of Aerosmith with this even older IP that doesn't have the support probably, but still, like, Powerline's making a comeback. You see these vintage shirts sold at Target. I have 3 Powerline shirts. I own 3 of them.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. I don't know why, but I do. I have 3 Powerline shirts. I think I have Powerline socks and like Powerline boxers or something. Not that you need to know more about my wardrobe, but there you go.
We need to know more about your underwear, Matt.
Everyone does. Oh man, I'll end with a fun story. When I was first youth pastor in Duluth, I had the 7-Up boxers that I won like in a contest from in high school. So we were like in a cabin at a youth camp, and so then like the students saw me in those boy students, don't get weird. They saw me in those 7-Up boxers and they started like relentlessly making fun of me and teasing me about it. Like, oh, 7-Up boxers. And so when I left that youth group, one of the guys, when he was a little older, he was 20 something when I left. And so I gave him as a gift that pair of 7-Up boxers. I'm like, cause you loved it so much. And he just thought it was hilarious. It was really funny. Really weird, but really funny.
All right, I guess we're ending on that. We could have ended on the Rock and Roller Coaster talk.
No, we couldn't have, because you need to know more about my boxers.
I did say that. Okay, I walked into that one.
You opened the door. Everyone out there just like, why? Why is this part of your episode? Well, too bad. All right. Let's talk about trivia. Last week we had 2 different trivia questions.
3. You forgot about mine?
Yeah, I left it out on purpose. No, I forgot about mine. All right. One of them, asked by Jeff, was what was the last line that Boba Fett said in the original series before he got brought back for the TV? And that was in Empire Strikes Back. He does not have a single line in Return of the Jedi. Technically, when he gets hit, he does like a Wilhelm scream, like, ah, whatever. That's not a line. We're not calling that a line. The line that he had was, put Captain Solo in the cargo hold. That's it. The guy had 4 lines in Empire Strikes Back. People like get on this high horse about Boba Fett and like, this is what this character's like. Like, you don't know what he's like. He had 4 lines. Shut up. You don't know. All right. What was your trivia? And then I'll tell you my other trivia from last
Yes,
week
the
answer.
character whose initials are BF, who the show is about, was, believe it or not, Boba Fett.
That's right. I remember. I was like, I know it's something stupid, but I don't remember what your
How
trivia
dare you,
question was.
sir?
Don't act like it's some smart. I worked really hard on it. I was
Well,
thinking for hours, and I came up with a question.
well, you both had trivia. I had to throw something in there.
So mine was the actor Tamura Morrison, who plays Boba Fett in the sequels, not in the sequels, in the Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian. He was in a couple movies in the last couple of years where he played a dad of a character, and both of the two times he was cast, that character had the same power as another character. So he played the dad in Aquaman, and he also played the dad in not SpongeBob like Brian thought last week, but the dad in Moana. So he ends up, and they even Moana and Aquaman in both their stories have similar character arcs of like discovering who they are and what they're meant for and all that sort of stuff. And so it's just like he was typecasted as this dad of people that could control water for like two different movies in like the course of 3 years or something like that. So
Yeah.
there you go. Oh,
So
I guess I have.
Okay, go
Wait,
ahead.
did you? No, you said you had one. You
Yeah.
came up with
So
one.
in the step-by-step Disney World episode, we talk about how JT and Rich are trying to impress these two girls.
Mhm.
One of the girls would go on to be a series regular on a popular sitcom from the 2000s.
Okay, there you go. I remember recognizing one, and I'm just blanking on what it was or who it was. And then you'll say it afterwards. I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I know. I was
Yeah,
just acting like I didn't know for the cameras."
pretty much.
All right. So mine is about Disney World. I know like the most about Back to the Future trivia. I
Trilogy.
know the I know the most about Back to the Future trilogy for trivia, but I think another thing that I have a way too much trivia about is Walt Disney World. And so Disney himself, Walt Disney, died about 5 years before one of the parks that he was creating before that was open. What park opened 5 years after he died?
I know because you told me earlier.
I know. I'm letting you think. No, I just like having dead air.
Yeah, I think that when we don't call out the dead air, I cut it out.
Yeah, but I called it out this time, so we're
So
leaving it in.
here we are.
Or you're not going to leave it in, and then I'm going to look like an idiot right now. Like, what dead air? What is he talking about?
You can look like an idiot without my help.
That's really true. That is one of the most true things you've said today.
Yeah.
Well, next week, before we end, I just want to give a shout out for next week. It's going to be awesome. We are getting super close to March, and everyone knows that in March, there's the basketball tournament for NCAA, March Madness. We are going to do our own style of March Madness. We're bringing back one of our buddies that we haven't had for a long time, Mike, and he's going to be on the show with us, and we are going to go over, like, what are the top 32 protagonists. We got 32 TV show protagonists, and we're going to come up with a number one in a bracket system head to head. We're going to go through that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, then you just don't enjoy life. So, because we are great.
We are great, and Mike's great, and everybody's great, except for the people who don't think that. Then you're not great.
Look at that. I hope you feel thoroughly shamed. That's in your face. All right. Well, before I talk any more about my boxers or make fun of our audience, we should go. So until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.